And welcome to the show. It's Will Richardson here, Nicholas Richardson there, somewhere looking dapper and usually his usual place, I see. Unless you've moved your bookcases somewhere else.
No, the bookcases haven't moved for a while.
You're not in a remote desert location where you've moved your books just to fool us?
Nope,
No?
I'm not.
No, you're not in North Africa, for example.
Not in North Africa, nor
Following
South
the trail
Africa.
of Rommel.
No, I'm not following Rommel's trail today.
You're not?
No.
Maybe another time.
We'll see.
Yeah, maybe another time. What about Patton? Never mind. Don't answer that. Lots of things are going on, but the main thing that's dragging on is the tariffs, right?
The tariffs do seem, because it seems to change from day to day, so it's very confusing for everybody. That's the point. And the other point is that the United States seems to be treating friend and foe alike when it comes to tariffs. Arguably treating some friends worse than its enemies. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely bizarre. Whether you're a Trump supporter or not, it is hard to make sense of any of this. And it's not even some clever negotiation, it's just chaos. That's the problem.
Well, one of the things that stands out in the tariff, resorting the tariffs on different countries is we're getting revenge. Not we, but America, U.S. government's getting revenge on Vietnam for winning that war.
Well, again, it depends. You know, the Vietnam. I mean, these wars are very
huge
difficult.
Tariffs on Vietnam, poor Vietnam.
Yeah, poor Vietnam. And I remember as a young child watching on the news every night as the North Vietnamese forces made their way down the Vietnam peninsula, if I can call it a peninsula, but down the side of the country anyway. The point was, and it's a point which
Vietnam is a sliver of a country.
Yeah, the late Richard Nixon made in his book The Real War, which was that the problem was, it was similar to what happened in Afghanistan. The Americans announced in advance when they were leaving, just at a point apparently when the South Vietnamese were beginning to make inroads against the North Vietnamese. Well, they had essentially, by the Americans announcing they would leave on X date, they had the rug pulled from underneath them. And in a funny sort of way on tariffs, Trump is in exactly the same position. He's failed to read the enemy, or his assessment of the enemy, in this case, China. And China is not blinking. Trump has already...
China's not only not blinking, they're making savage attacks on the American people. Verbal attacks, anyway. Latest thing was one of the spokespeople for China's calling that we're going to get even with those American peasants. Oh, the American peasants.
That's because
that's our job. That's not their job.
Yeah, but that's because that was a reference to J.D. Vance saying, why should we let Chinese peasants lend them money to sell goods to our people, or words to that effect. So yeah. I think he'd used the word peasants. I think they were just repaying him in kind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But the other point is we've got to remember, whether you like them or not, the Chinese take a long-term view. They're planning for 50, 100 years ahead.
Yeah.
The US is very dependent on the stock market, which plans a quarter ahead.
Well, when you have a dictator, you can put things. It doesn't mean things are going to go well. I mean, look at Stalin; things didn't go well, and everybody hated him at the end.
Well, no, they didn't. But but what we have created is in President Xi, we have a Joseph Stalin with money.
Yeah,
a Joseph Stalin who this time has something we want. The real Joseph Stalin had nothing we wanted. Russia had nothing we wanted. China has things we want. And indeed, they have gone out of their way over the last few years to go around the world, gathering unto themselves things that we need.
China.
And this is the mistake. We've allowed it to happen. We've been asleep at the wheel, as people might say. It's particularly notable in the United Kingdom, where this idiot Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, is covering agricultural land with Chinese-made solar panels. And it is well known in the industry that the Chinese solar panel manufacturers are among the worst emitters of emissions and things. You know, they have a really, for in environmental terms, a really dirty industry make it. So we're killing ourselves. Our folk are losing the jobs, and we're actually not making any emissions gain in the world because these things are made in the most foul way from an environmental point of view. But the whole thing is stupid because we have politicians who are obsessed with their own weird ideology, which seems to think we gave an example to the world other than one of stupidity by cutting our emissions. We have not cut a single emission in the United Kingdom. We have exported our emissions by exporting our industry and exporting our jobs and making our people poorer. And if a huge tsunami were to arrive tomorrow and cover the whole of the United Kingdom and its islands, it would make not one jot of difference to the world's emissions total. This is how stupid the policy is. Sorry, I made that point before. Lesson over for the day. But you know, so my point.
Note to self.
Yeah, my point really is that when Trump is dealing with the Chinese, he's dealing with people for whatever reason are taking a long-term view, and they are prepared to stare America out on this one, as they have done so far. From his tariffs, he's now selectively, I think, exempted for the time being laptops and iPhones and one or two other things. But it's a crazy situation where there's Taiwan, effectively an ally of the United States, a supplier of things the United States needs, is treated better on the tariff front than Iran, an enemy. How can that possibly be the word?
Is treated what? Better? What do you mean?
Worse. Sorry, it's treated worse.
It's treated worse. Yeah.
That's what I meant. Sorry, I was getting it the wrong way around. I meant to say Iran is treated better. An enemy is treated better than a friend. I mean, this whole thing is just so nonsensical. The bond market last week sent a shot across his bows. You know, there is no doubt about it, if China continues its sale of treasuries, US treasuries, it is going to be a major problem for the United States in terms of the cost of future borrowing, or the cost even of current borrowing for that matter. Well, why is this significant? Because 10 years ago, the US dollar accounted for 70% of the world's holdings of, foreign currency, reserve currency, if you like. Now it's down to 60%. It's not going to be long at this rate before it's 50%. And once it falls below 50, America's ability, or the United States' ability to finance itself so easily will be curtailed. And then the folk will really realize the pickle there. And this is all needless. That's my point. It's all needless. You know, it was America, as I keep repeating ad nauseum, no doubt, for our listeners and viewers. It was the decision of American corporations that made Mexico, Canada, China, Vietnam, and other countries key manufacturers of things which American consumers and business needs to buy. It wasn't the Chinese didn't suddenly wake up one morning and invent the things the United States needs. United States corporations, to save money, to make bigger profits, to pay their executives millions and millions more each year, decided they'd be smart and abandon the major manufacturing centers of America and build their factories somewhere else. And now they are ruining the consequences. Because to reverse that is extremely difficult. It can be done, but it is it's costly and it takes a long time.
Sure.
Sorry, I think that my here endeth the umpteenth lesson on tariffs.
Great, Scott. Let's move on from tariffs. I think everything that you said makes sense to me, but I think that the other big thing that's sort of fallen back as I look at the news, apart from this constant wrangling over the tariffs, is fallen back. I mean, fallen out of the news a bit, is the continuing problem, not only in Israel, but in Ukraine. And Donald Trump, when he was running president, said, one, if I had been president, this war never would have started. Well, we can't tell about that. But what we can tell is that he said, I will end this thing, in a couple of days or a week or whatever he said, as soon as I become president again. And now he's finding out that being nice to Vladimir Putin does not
Well,
solve the problem.
it's actually worse than being nice to Putin. Being nice to Putin may or may not have had any effect, probably not. But what is worse is Putin can see that Trump is being beastly to Zelensky. So that actually strengthens Putin's hand. And this is
Well,
the
there's a
point.
lot of people on the right. This is the point. There's a lot of people on the right, the extreme right particularly. Some of those people would call themselves moderates, but let's just say extreme right on the Ukraine issue, who prefer Russia to Ukraine. They don't see the value of any of those Central European countries. They're looking at power politics and saying, um, we're big guys too. We can understand how big guys feel, which is exactly the wrong way to build alliances against totalitarian nations, to sort of absorb some of their characteristics, to be admiring of their characteristics. You
Well,
cannot.
yeah. If we go back to
It's like you were saying. Let me finish. It's like you were saying about China. They can plan way ahead. Well, that's something to admire, that they can plan way ahead. But the reason they can is because they're totalitarian.
well, that's
Okay.
true. That's true to a certain extent. But I mean, I think the reason they can is that they just have a different mindset.
Well, from the start, they have a different mindset because it's the oldest civilization.
But the problem
And
is that Trump's activities are self-defeating because the population of Russia is what, 110 million people? They're not very wealthy.
yeah,
They're
140,
Yeah, and so
140.
what Trump is doing, he's alienating the rest of the world who might buy American products in favor of a country who will never buy American products, who would buy a very small amount of American consumer items were they available. So he's not even, the man who claims to have written The Art of the Deal, which was ghost written, of course, the man who claims to be such a good negotiator is actually turning out to be a rather poor negotiator.
Yes.
And the reason to adopt his own analogy, the reason that Zelensky, poor chap, has no cards is because Trump snatched them from him and gave them to Russia. So that's why Zelensky has no cards. Of course, Zelensky had the presence of mind to say, "I'm not here to play cards," which was to give him his credit, bearing in mind that English isn't even his second language. That was quite good. So really, the point is whether you like Trump or you don't like Trump, he is exhibiting none of the things which he told us he would be able to do. He is not showing himself to be a good negotiator. He's not showing himself to be a particularly skillful president. And it is just very strange to know why he is behaving the way he behaves.
Well, no one knows. I think he has certain things that he concentrates on, and he
Yeah, and
always has.
the only person who's
Notice-
benefiting from this in the immediate time is Mr. Putin, who, of course, is rubbing his hands with glee every time some nonsense comes out of the White House. For two reasons. One, it takes a bit of the pressure off him because Trump has obviously is engaged with something else. And two, it makes him think, well, I really don't have much to fear from this guy because he is so bad that it's an answer to my prayers if I did pray. And they don't know what they want or how to go about it. And I do know what I want and how to go about it, which I am doing, and it's taking me longer than I want. But so far, I haven't really been completely thrown off my path. And this is the point. And a lot of the sort of rest of the world who are not immediately closely allied to the United States are probably listening now to the siren voices of China, who are going around claiming, oh, we never invade anybody, we're just nice, reliable business partners, which, as we've seen, is not actually true either. I'm sure the good folk of Tibet have something to say about that.
Yeah, they just invade on their doorstep. They've invaded Korea, of course, during the Korean War. They invaded Vietnam many times over the years. And people have invaded them. So
yeah, well, exactly. So the
this
point is,
monolithic China that you were sort of throwing up, I mean, throwing out there. I don't really believe that China has many advantages. I mean, I don't believe that totalitarian countries based on example are the better way to go.
I'm not saying they are the better way to go, far from it, but I'm saying they have managed.
I'm not saying you say they're a better way to go. I'm just saying that there are a lot of people who do say that, and I don't agree with it. I think that the way to go, the best way to go, is with a republic, by example in
Well, I
history.
agree with you, and this is why what's happening in America is so distressing because it's. I mean, this was the case of this character who I think was it Ecuador. He was accidentally or deliberately a man who had the right to live in the United States was sent back to Ecuador, I think by mistake. The Supreme Court has said to the president, "Bring him home," and the president saying,
I
"I'm
think
not
it's
bringing him home."
you're talking about El Salvador. I think. Are you talking about that
I,
guy?
well, I'm not sure whether it was El Salvador or Ecuador. Who was the president of that country was in the White House the other
Yeah,
day?
yeah, that's El
Is
Salvador.
that okay? Well, I apologize to the Ecuadorians and the El
Get
Salvadorians, but
that, but the guy who was in the White House, I forget his name right now, but he's president of
yeah,
Salvador, and he's famous for attacking the gangs, and he's
that's right.
complicit.
And so Trump
And
thinks he's wonderful, and they're not going to send this chap back. And the Supreme Court has said, well, he should be brought back because he should never have been sent out of the country in the first place.
yeah, well, it's important. It's not just that Trump thinks he's great; his own people overwhelmingly think he's great because he has stopped this rampaging crime, and he has improved the economy.
Well, I realize that, and that's all very laudable. But the point is, you still mustn't. The ends do not justify the means. And therefore, if you have accidentally deported somebody from the country who has every right to be there, then
Yeah,
that
saying
has to be corrected.
and I don't know what that means. That's a cliche, but let's go back because you didn't understand the country. You said Ecuador, so let's make it.
Well,
Uh,
El Salvador, it was.
Ecuador is a very different kettle of fish from El Salvador in Central America. But the point is that uh, it's here's the thing: isn't it a due process issue,
It
Nicholas?
is, yeah.
Isn't that the thing?
That is the thing.
Because I think you mentioned that in a
Yeah.
previous talk. But on the other side, here's the thing: people say that he is in one of the gangs, MS-13, I think it is, or is that not right? I don't know. MG-13, or whatever, some stupid gang.
Well, that was based on their misreading of one of his tattoos, I think. But anyway, yes.
Okay, it may have been. I'm not even sure why, because there seems to be one side that's absolutely sure that he is a member of that gang, and another side, or a perfectly sane voices, are saying he's not in that gang at all. So don't we need to find out?
Well, we do need to find out. Yes,
It's all very confusing.
it is
And
confusing.
and the frightening thing is when due process and habeas corpus goes out the window, that makes it easier for more innocent people down the line,
Well, that's exactly the point.
yeah, to be imprisoned or to be excommunicated from the country. Now, the other thing is, you can take an extreme example of how this goes wrong if you look at the death penalty. The death penalty is the ultimate case. There are no reprieves. You're either alive or you're dead. Plus, you spend all that time in the horrible conditions. I investigated this and wrote about death row some years ago, and I mean, it's a pretty bleak story, as anyone can imagine. But imagine that you're innocent and you're on death row and you're going to be killed. I mean, innocent people have been killed,
Of course.
convicted and killed, because people are not perfect.
Well, that's a
So
very strong argument against the death penalty, of course.
perhaps the strongest. Yeah, and I think in a similar way, looking at habeas corpus and to due process is the beginning of where you start to make big mistakes, right?
Of course.
And you can't make this guy. I mean, I don't know the story about this. I haven't read the court documents, et cetera, and immigration documents. I don't know. Maybe you know more about it than I do.
No, I don't know more than you know.
No, about the same. Yeah. Okay. So we both know that this is an underlined case. What's going on? There's two sides who are absolutely sure of two different things. The truth must be somewhere in the middle, no?
Well, the truth must be one or the other, actually. The truth is not always in the middle, is it? If you think
Well,
about it.
Yeah, but not must be, but might be. Yeah, exactly. Much more precise.
It's more like a seesaw. It's either up or it's down.
Here's the thing. Maybe he knows people. He probably knows people in that gang, right?
Maybe I don't. We don't know. The whole point is it's questionable whether he's anything to do with the gang in the first place. That's what we need to establish.
Okay.
And
At any rate,
it seems that the only
confusing.
evidence they had he was in the gang was on the basis of a tattoo.
Well, tattoos can be telling, but as you say, if the hadn't heard that, and I don't even want to go there, because
No. Well, no. I just mentioned it en
how you
passant.
can base a case on a tattoo. That doesn't
Well,
make sense.
but I think this is used as an illustration of how mad things are in danger of becoming generally. People are, on a bit of a rampage.
What do you think? Yes, exactly. So, and one of the rampages is demonizing the demonizing of Ukraine. I noticed I got Ukraine colors. You pointed it out before. I didn't realize that when I put up this. I just liked it. But Ukraine has been demonized in the beginning of the discussions about Ukraine and Russia and some kind of ceasefire or peace treaty, at least a ceasefire, which we haven't seen. Every time they have a ceasefire, Putin kills more people, usually civilians, like he did on Palm Sunday. 30 some people were killed, I think, in Sumy, right on the border. I mean, the guy is bloodthirsty, a bloodthirsty tyrant. And to say that Ukraine, this is the thing, to say Ukraine started that war, which otherwise perfectly sane seeming people say all the time. Now in the United States, what is going on?
Well, this is remarkable. I really genuinely don't understand how otherwise intelligent people can be such limited understanding of the world around them, and in particular, since they have a lot to say about Ukraine, how they can be in such ignorance of the true facts of the matter.
Yeah.
With regard to Ukraine and the starting of that particular war.
Yeah, it seems pretty obvious that one country invaded the other, and it's been going on for 11 years, this continuing invasion and encroachment. And it's not Ukraine has only invaded Russia. It hasn't even invaded Russia. It's a self-defense sort of moves to try and take the pressure off other places where Russia's crossed their frontier and presses on toward the center, or towards the river anyway, that divides Ukraine, that flows through Kiev down to the Black Sea and Crimea. So this policy, the idea that you would get a ceasefire, let alone stop the war with a treaty, has not happened. It's not going to happen. And it remains, it's just sitting there simmering. The same issues are there. Meanwhile, Russia has mobilized men to the tune of over 1 million now, I think. And that's what they're reporting. What are you going to do with these men? You're going to stand them down? They got to go somewhere. I mean, once a dictator's mobilized that many people and got them all revved up, if he retreats, he looks weak, doesn't he? What do you say?
Well, I think that's always been one of the problems with mass mobilization. Of course, it goes back to the A.J.P. Taylor theory about how the First World War broke out. Railway timetables. Once you'd mobilized, it was too complicated to switch off the mobilization. Maybe the modern world is a little more different.
That's an excellent. No, I think it's an excellent point. And you were dealing with absolute rulers back then, kings, queens, royal families, anyway. And we're not dealing with that now, but we are dealing with dictators who are, absolutists. And I would suggest that Putin is the most absolute, along with Xi and a couple of the other, certainly not the mullahs because they can be replaced, but their ethos keeps hold of Iran, but also the North Korean.
Well, North Korea is a particular case. I mean, I think Iran is interesting because as far as I understand it, the feeling amongst many Iranian people is that this regime of these mad mullahs, if I may put it thusly, it's coming, maybe very slowly, but it's coming towards an end. Iran has suffered tremendous blows to its prestige and ability to get much done in the region. Hamas has been severely weakened by Israel, as has Hezbollah. They've lost their ally in Assad in Syria. Israel has effectively taken out their air defenses. So they are in a weak position. However, they have, despite this, improved their ability to enrich uranium, and they are a lot closer to being able to fashion a nuclear weapon than they were before. And indeed, they've also done, as we know, work on their intercontinental ballistic type missiles. Now, we do know that Trump has sent, I think, so far 6 or 7 of the B-2 bombers to Diego Garcia, which puts him in range of Iran. He has told the Iranians if they don't come to a deal now, he's going to bomb them. I mean, the point to remember is, again, in recent years, the Iranians are not daft people, and a lot of their technology, a lot of their capability is now buried deep underground, and it's going to need some particularly strong weaponry, if you can do it at all, to actually breach these underground bunkers which they have constructed. So it's not easy. I mean, the argument is often that had Trump stuck with the deal which he reneged on last time he was president, Iran's nuclear program would not be as advanced as it is now. So that again is also another difficulty. And he's not getting, even with the best will in the world, it seems unlikely to be able to get out of Iran what they were able to get out of Iran last time round. Because, you know, the ratchet has changed and Iran is now so much more capable in the area of being able to fashion a nuclear weapon. So again, that, you know, I know Israel.
What happens if Iran gets that? We're back to the Persian predicament. What do you think happens if Iran gets a nuclear weapon?
Well, they are obviously in a much greater position to carry out their wish to obliterate Israel.
Why would any American government, knowing that, why would any American government make it easier on Iran and their leadership?
Well, well, I don't think they have. They have not necessarily made it easier. The point is, there was a deal that was done, which was to try primarily to control or to persuade the Iranians that they didn't need or as an incentive not to develop their nuclear weapons. Other things would be made available. There'd be an easing of sanctions and so on and so forth. And the last time, you remember, last time he was president, Trump withdrew the Americans from that deal. And the Iranians have not sort of said, "Oh, what a pity," and sat on their hands. They have continued doing what they have done. So here we are 4 or 5, 6 years later. And the Iranians are...
Why is the policy against Iran so inconsistent?
Well, I don't know. I mean...
And Russia, for that matter. I just don't get it.
I don't know. Trump has really brought complete chaos to this area because nobody's quite sure what he believes or who's his friend, who's his enemy, why he's doing this. Other than the fact he sees himself as a strong president, and strong leaders tend to admire other strong leaders if they're sort of a club of strong leaders.
They make decisions. Making decisions is strength.
To which he wishes to belong, but that's really not how the Republic, the United States, actually works, and that's not really how it has ever worked. And the tragedy in all of this is eventually, if it doesn't work out as he hopes, and it probably won't, because nothing he's doing seems to have any long-term logic to it, then his supporters are going to be those who are going to be worst affected. It's already the case that many, good, honest, toiling American folk in the Midwest will be going to their auto shops to get, their brake pads replaced on their cars to keep them on the road for another year. And instead of paying $50 for their brake pads because they're all made in China, they'll be paying $75, $80, $90. And that's going to make a big difference to these folk. And they're going to think, well, why have we got inflation? Where is all this? What's going on? And once I mean, obviously there are the faithful who, whatever happens, will believe what we need is more Trumpism. Like the Soviet Union needed more communism, and every revolution needs more of the same revolution. even at the point it's consuming its children. The children are still saying more, more, more. And that is a problem. There is no, or there appears to be no consistent foreign policy, because the world is a lot more complicated than most of us would care to believe. And everything is linked to everything else these days. And on
Well,
the one hand,
there's business and there's politics. We wouldn't have both if they weren't there for different reasons. And
well,
diplomacy.
exactly. And the point is, on the one hand, Russia is actually receiving help from Iran. So it's all right being pally with Putin, but if you're pally with Putin, but you're not, you want to strike about a fight with Iran, but why not with Putin? Because Iran is supporting Putin. And similarly, the Chinese are not. I don't think the Chinese are as honourable as they would have us believe. They are also supplying Russia with many things which Russia needs to continue this.
Communists, by definition, are not honourable.
Well, exactly, they're not honourable.
We can just, forget that. We know that.
So. But I think what we should be doing with Iran is obviously maintaining the pressure on the nuclear weapons. But I think it's probably worth revisiting what we can do to help the Iranian people to bring about, as they did in 1979, when they deposed the Shah, to bring about regime change. I mean, the conditions seem to be much more favorable than they've been for many a long year, for the reasons I outlined a few moments ago. But also, I'm reading about it and reports in the better newspapers. Young people in Iran are beginning to protest more. They are not frightened in the way they were of the religious police and others. And although the regime is very repressive, more and more people are beginning to realize, I think, that the Iranian mullahs cannot actually arrest everybody in the country. The late Shah's son is increasingly popular, not to be replaced as Shah. And he himself has said he doesn't wish to be the leader of a new Iran, but as a sort of focal point for encouraging resistance against the current regime. So I think we should be, maybe the State Department is, I don't know, but certainly these are areas now which might be worthy of some renewed activity.
Here's one for you. Moving on, well said. As usual, Hungary has passed. Let's move to Central Europe, because you are right now, and both of us know loads about that region through personal experience and also reporting. But Hungary has passed a constitutional amendment. This is Orban's country, who's the favorite of the ultra conservatives in America, or let's say ultra populists. I don't see the connection, but there it is. I don't see the reason. I see the connection. Hungary's passed a constitutional amendment banning public events for gay people. What do you think about that?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I'm not like you. I'm not in favor of banning people who I disagree with. And it depends on how we define public events. I mean, some of the so-called pride marches you see in the capitals or the bigger cities in Western Europe, some of them seem to me to go far beyond what is needed. I remember, so it's anecdotal, so I apologize, but there was an article a couple of years ago by a Guardian journalist, so by all means somebody generally disposed to this sort of thing, who'd been out on the streets of London with his two young boys and had happened across the Pride March. I forget which year it was. It wasn't the most recent one, probably the year before. And said some of the things he saw being displayed and the behaviours he saw on some of the floats going by, he said he did not know, in all honesty, how he could explain that to two young boys. So I think some of this public display has got beyond a joke. And I realise I won't be popular for saying that, but this fortunately is a sort of programme where we can say things which are not popular and continue to say them, but they have to be said.
That's just common sense. I mean,
exactly.
Anything sexual for in public where children can see it is to be avoided at all
Well, I
costs.
agree, but the trouble is,
Yeah.
many of these folks seem to think they have. You see, it's a debate or a discussion I've touched on before. These folk, it seems to me, and not all of them, obviously, not all of them, but the more extreme, they're not satisfied with toleration anymore. They're not happy that they go about their lives as the rest of us do. They require us, in fact, to go out of our way to celebrate their lifestyle choices. So they've got whatever it is they wanted, but that's not enough for them. They need constantly the attention to be told how wonderful it is that you've decided to live in this, to our way of thinking, this rather peculiar way. And most people are resistant to that. Most people, I think, most decent people say, okay, I live my life one way, you live your life a different way, get on with it. But for goodness sake, please don't inconvenience me and expect me to go out of my way to tell you what a wonderful choice you've made. For two reasons. One, it's not my job to tell you you've made a wonderful choice. And two, deep down, I don't believe you have made a wonderful choice, but it's your choice. I'm not going to interfere with it. But please, keep it to yourself, more or less. And I think that's the way that we've got out of balance. And we see this, of course, in this whole recent years, this whole so-called trans debate. These organizations we've set up with the noble aim of bringing about homosexual equality have essentially succeeded. So they had to find some other grievance to pursue, because these organizations are not happy they've achieved what they set out to. They've got to be constantly creating grievances. You see the same in the...
It's like bureaucracy.
It has to justify its own existence.
Exactly.
And you see the same in, you'd think everybody concedes that in the United Kingdom, for example, I'm sure it's similar in the United States, but in the United Kingdom in particular, the racial equality, the breakdown of discrimination has made tremendous bounds in reach. I mean, there's effectively, most people don't care any longer. And yet, if you read the work of the sort of pressure groups, you'd think the United Kingdom was today in 2025 like the American South in 1890 or something. There's constantly these folk are held back. It's terrible. There are lynch mobs, and the police are going around shooting them. I mean, fortunately,
no. I agree with you. I think that nowadays,
and it's because these people have they need a grievance. They have to have a grievance.
People look at each other nowadays. I think they look at the person, say it, and listen to them and say, is this person attractive to me? And I don't think it matters where they come from. Are they attracted to me? Do we share interests? So that's a good point.
So I think it
ought to be obvious, but
it is a bit. Yeah. So the Hungarian thing, it is a bit of a strange one.
Yeah.
But I think it's an overreaction. I can only assume it's an overreaction to the sort of extreme, constantly assuming that by these pressure groups they claim that their members or the people they represent are somehow constantly discriminated against, etc., etc., etc. It doesn't. There are people now who like to stir up grievances. They see a problem where a problem used not to exist. And this is the problem, this identity politics, this constantly dividing people. Most people, as you say, most normal people don't care about what other people are or what they believe or what they think or even what they do. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. The grievance groups have to say, no, you're a white man. You don't understand us. We are discriminated against. We can't get jobs in Hollywood. What? Or whatever it is they're grieving about. And it's pathetic. But because the decent folk won't stand up and sort of say, hang on, enough is enough. Please don't be taking the mickey. You've got what you want. We've tried to give you equality. There are very few problems left. But don't accuse decent folk who've come a long way of somehow harboring or bringing about discrimination where discrimination doesn't actually exist. This is a problem. And yet at the same time, people will not tackle the real issues. The real problem, for example, if we look at racial discrimination in the United States and increasingly in the United Kingdom, the real problem is boys, particularly boys, growing up without a father figure, or without a good male role model in the family. This is the problem. But nobody wants to talk about that because all types of family are equally valid. Well, they may be equally valid for the folks struggling to bring up a family, but they're not equally valid if we're talking about the ideal way in which to bring up children. But people walk away from this. They don't. Oh,
Yeah,
they
they're
say,
not the best recipes for success,
exactly. They're not the
perhaps.
best.
But even though some are successful, and there's so many factors that go into
Yeah, but
families. I mean, we have to have a psychologist
but
here.
we've lost the ability to tackle and to think about the problems we do have, and we spend all our time and energy, all this heat and light, on problems which don't exist, which have been invented by pressure groups to give the pressure groups to justify their existence. And this is the tragedy of it all. This is a tragedy of it all. And we've seen it again in the UK, this terrible, it's continuing. These young girls, white girls, people talk about grooming gangs. They're not grooming gangs, they're rape gangs by men predominantly of Pakistani Muslim extraction. And they don't want to talk about that because that's racist. And that's, I'm sorry. These girls are, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, what the left are always saying is the rape of your daughter or somebody else's daughter is a small price to pay for me getting votes from these people who I'm now frightened of. There is, funny enough, on that very point, this arch atheist, Richard Dawkins, was interviewed by about something by Piers Morgan. And Piers Morgan asked him a question about Muslims, and Dawkins, has a lot to say about everything, was visibly frightened to comment on Muslims. That tells you how bad things have got, in actual fact.
Yeah. Well,
So,
he's afraid they're going to put him on a list and try and knock him off. But
exactly.
As they did with Rushdie, I mean, they waited 3 decades to have a go at him at a reading. Who, by the way, he's been teaching at one of my former schools for a long time.
A very brave person.
Yeah, we've come actually to the point where the last thing I want to talk about today, which was this is a very important week for those who are Christian, and it's Easter week, right?
Holy Week, yes.
Yes. And you're
I think you'll find technically next week is Easter week.
Yes, well, it's Sunday is Easter.
Sunday is Easter Sunday, yes.
Yeah, and Good Friday coming up. Obviously, is a couple of days away, or by the time this is posted, it may be tomorrow. It may be the day before, 2 days away or 1 day away. I think this will be posted tomorrow. So, what is the importance of Easter today? Does that message even get through? It seems like many Christians are ignoring their own message and adopting, maybe for political reasons or humanist reasons, the being more forgiving of other religions than they are of their own. What does Easter mean anymore?
Well, I think it depends where you are in the world. I mean, I think to Catholics and to other Christians, it's obviously the time of the year when one commemorates the fact of the establishment of the Christian religion. That's the first point. I think in a country like Poland, of course, it still means a lot. The churches are always full. You see people on the streets with the various Palm Sunday processions and other things. So I think it does mean a lot. It means a lot here. But you're right. We're living in a very secular, or I was going to say atheist. I don't quite mean atheist, but a very secular age where people think
religious, perhaps.
Religious. Sorry, thank you. That's a much
religious.
A religious age, yes.
Yeah.
I think that's a problem. People think that modern man is somehow so clever, that these are the sort of fairy stories told us by our grandparents and others in years gone by when men were not very clever. Well, I don't believe that men today are actually, or women for that matter, are much cleverer than they used to be. They may know different things about different things, but they don't necessarily have the same innate wisdom that our forebears had. And I'm sure, like you, I am amused by the religious enthusiasm and the religious intensity of the atheists who, on my own, when I bother to look at it on social media, the threads of those people who every day are trying to tell us, that God doesn't exist, etc., etc. Well, if it doesn't exist, why are they so bothered about telling me? Do they feel that my own life is so lacking, that I am so misguided, that I need this constant reminder from complete strangers on Facebook? If it doesn't exist, fine, off they go and enjoy themselves. They seem very miserable to think that I, enjoying my faith, and I'm not preaching to them, but they have to preach to me. I think, was it Shakespeare? The lady doth protest too much. It was somebody who said that, and I sometimes
Shakespeare, yeah.
Yeah, I think I sometimes think these atheists.
Thinks the lady doth protest.
Yeah. Was it Romeo and Juliet? I can't remember which play.
Maybe I can't remember.
Yeah, or was it Hamlet or something? I don't remember. Anyway, so I think that there's like G.K. Chesterton said, people who don't believe in God don't believe in nothing; they believe in anything. And the same people who tell me I am somehow misguided for believing in God.
Do people tell you that?
Not to my face, but I mean, I'm telling you, people in general. I think people in general, not so much. I think there are, I think you and I have many contemporaries who probably would take it to our face if they could summon up the courage. And they will always post sort of stuff on. But the same people, it's very weird. The same people who will spend all day posting derogatory remarks about Christianity, or about the Catholic Church, or about the failings of individual clergy folk, will of course say absolutely nothing about Islam and the persecution of women by Islam, etc., etc., etc. And I wonder why. It's just, for me, it's very, very strange. So they're not even consistent in their own atheistic beliefs. They are frightened. You see, the point is the Catholic Church doesn't go around killing people it disagrees with, or it doesn't. I've never, ever been in a sermon in the Catholic Church where the priest has urged me to go and kill the infidel. Unfortunately, I gather this is probably fairly typical in, on Friday prayers in your average mosque, or certainly your average mosque in Iran, maybe in other mosques.
I don't want to put it in contrast to other religions. I've just, as it is Easter week, and you are a fellow who gets up at 5:30 in the morning on Sunday and goes to a Latin mass.
Yes, it's a blessing to have it.
Yeah, and I've seen in your own life where this, over the last few years, where doing this has really been a benefit to you. It seems.
Of course, it's a benefit.
Okay, what's the value of it? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I think the value of it is
in your life.
The value of it in my life is it encourages you to have a different perspective on life. It encourages you to put your own life in context. It encourages you to, if you follow the gospel injunction, to love your neighbor as yourself, which requires you to do things. One, of course, it encourages you to love yourself, which, of course, in a completely atheistic context, all these mindfulness people are telling us we must do.
Maybe the hardest thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, the hardest thing. But I think it just really ultimately gives you an ability to be part of something bigger than yourself, to put your own life and problems in context, and thereby to actually become, if that makes sense, a kind of better version of yourself. I'm not trying to I should maybe, but I'm not a clergyman, so I don't go out trying to convert other people. But of course, I can each day try to convert myself into a better version of myself. And also to appreciate. Our grandparents were always saying you've got to count your blessings. Well, in actual fact, we should count our blessings.
Yeah.
Because we are most of us, although we think we don't have what we think we would like to have or what we ought to have, in actual fact, when we look at it logically, we have far more than many other people on the planet. And we should actually be thankful. Then I'm immensely thankful that on Thursday and on Friday and on Saturday, I can go to the Catholic services for those 3 days, celebrated according to the 1945 Missal, which for any traditionalists watching, of course, is a rare blessing indeed. So that really, and the fact that
why is it? What's special about it?
Because the Mass essentially has always been pretty, since about 400 AD. The Mass was more or less in its common form. Pope Pius V sort of slightly more codified it, and that we continued happily ever after until the Second Vatican Council decided to start mucking around, and we end up with the modern mass, which many people consider to be, you know, lacking in many things, lacking in beautiful language, lacking in due reverence, etc., etc. But in 1955, Pope Pius XII changed the and many people see this was the beginning of the end, or the beginning of the rot, or when the rot set in, changed the form of the services in Holy Week, which is this week. And many people say that was the beginning of the end. So the church to which I go here, they follow the 1962 Missal, which most traditional Catholics follow, but for Holy Week they follow the 1945 Missal, which was before the changes in 1955, which is just interesting. You know, it all depends. It all depends. How much of a traditionalist
you appreciate the history, ecclesiastical history, and that's why this means a lot to you. But the important thing also, I mean, that's great. I mean, I love cathedrals because I love the architecture and everything else, apart from it being representing the religious aspects of civilization. But in this sense, what we're talking about with Easter, I think you hit on it. It's the founding day of a religion. It's not Christmas.
No, it's not Christmas. No.
It's Easter. It's the resurrection, which is the rebirth, which is the second chance for
exactly. And of course, for every Christian, it's a good opportunity every year to sort of bring about some sort of spiritual rebirth in your own life. So
how do we deal with evil, Nicholas?
People
how do we deal with evil?
How do you deal with evil? Well, you just have to accept
the main principle of Christianity is forgiveness. How do we deal with evil? Because we see a lot of evil in the world today, particularly these totalitarian leaders. By nature, what they're doing is evil. How do we deal with that? As Christians?
Well, that is of course very difficult. I mean, the way we deal with evil on our personal level is we have to speak out and do when we can, and not, we have to be like the Good Samaritan and not walk by on the other side. We have to get involved to the extent our station in life allows us to get involved. That's the point. And in a practical sense, of course, if we're given a choice at an election to vote for the evil candidate or the less evil candidate, then we should obviously choose the less evil candidate, or the good candidate if such a candidate exists. But we mustn't be frightened of evil. It exists, and we just have to be internally strong enough to make sure that the evil doesn't affect our daily lives, in the sense that we do not become evil ourselves.
This is the operative point. Well said.
That's the point. Evil always exists, and the late John Paul II said that wherever the church was strong, Satan was going to be strong, because where the church is weak, Satan has already won, essentially, or could win. But where the church is strong, of course, there's more of a battle for Satan, and we have to, each of us in our own daily lives, we are presented by lots of micro decisions, or decisions which are micro in the sense of the totality of the world, where we have a choice between following the right decision, which we know in our heart of hearts is the correct decision, or the wrong decision, or compromising. And I think if we want evil not to triumph, we have to always make sure we try as best we can to take the correct decision.
And what will you be reflecting? Well said. And what will you be reflecting on, do you think, going through the rest of this week?
Well, I will be reflecting on, well, first I will be giving thanks for the many blessings I and my family have received. Simple things. As you know, my elder son always wanted to be a pilot, and over the last year he's qualified and is now flying passengers in an aeroplane. So that's a great achievement. The younger son got into university in England. That's a great achievement. I'm give immense thanks for that. We're all here. We're all still
We
healthy.
shouldn't take these things for granted.
We
That's
shouldn't.
what you're saying.
I have
Yeah.
direct contemporaries
Yeah.
of ones I actually know about from university who are already dead and been dead for a number of years. So I'm immensely thankful I'm not one of them yet. The day will come eventually, and my father celebrated his 87th birthday on
Wow.
Tuesday.
Happy birthday to your father.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm immensely, immensely grateful for that. He's 87. He's in good health. He does everything. Lives very independently, so that's fine. So again, you may think, oh well, these are little things. They're cliched things, but they're big things. They're important because at the end of the day,
these are the mainstays. And
these are the main, because at the end of the
them.
day, if this is an interesting philosophical point, but happiness comes from within. And we could be sitting here, and I could be sitting in some huge palace, ideally in the south of France somewhere, with no friends, no family, nobody to talk to, with all the with the wealth of Croesus, and I could be miserable, and that would be terrible. So I think the main thing to reflect on at this time is to think, yes, what have we, be thankful for what we do have, and then say to yourself, okay, well, this is a time of rebirth. What can I do over the coming year, to take advantage of that, and what more improvements can I make to my life and the life of those around me, which is essentially our own humble way of living the gospel. I think that's all any of us can do. But I think if we all did that all the time, the world would genuinely be a much happier place. And I'm not claiming to be any saint or particularly charitable, but you asked me the question, so I'm trying to answer it.
Yeah, that's
these
all
are
we can do is ask the question and try to answer.
And we could all, we could all take minor practical steps. We could all probably read the Gospels a bit more frequently, and just that would give us some ideas, and reflect on the life of Christ, and really what is important in life. And
It's interesting that I don't even think you have to be a Christian or have a religion to have a sense of the awesome nature of the universe and a divinity. Perhaps our religions are a way of putting poetry to that deep set feeling, but and giving a framework for us to understand, because I think there's an intuition in human that there is something divine. There is a guiding.
I think it was Cardinal Newman who said, that vocation wasn't a message from God in the middle of the night saying, go off and become a priest. But a vocation was a feeling that you just wanted or needed to know more about the world around you. And that, which is why, of course, many eminent churchmen have been, there've been many eminent scientists from the church. The work on black holes, the original pioneering work on black holes, was undertaken by a Belgian Catholic priest. So the idea that science and the church are in conflict is, of course, I think, a more modern atheistic idea. I think science tries to make sense of the physical world, and religion tries to make sense of the metaphysical or the philosophical, or dare I say it, psychological world.
Copernicus was a mystic,
Well, exactly. So I think you saw. And we could, I mean, obviously, there are many reasons why I think, or many justifications for faith. Ultimately, faith is faith. We don't know. What we can do is I'll give it our best guess, and we look at the.
You're a wise man, Nicholas. You're a wise man.
We look at the work of people like St. Thomas Aquinas. And we talk. Okay, well, I mean, just very quickly, the universe started with the Big Bang. Fair enough, but what brought about the Big Bang? All these are questions which I'm not sure we as human beings necessarily have the mental capacity to contemplate.
Divine force, the divine force. We don't have the capacity.
No doubt.
May I leave you with two thoughts, Nicholas?
You may.
I thought what you said was very wise.
Thank you.
And I wanted to hear your thoughts, because I know that you do take these issues, you think a lot about these issues, and you do appreciate the everyday victories, which are the important ones. I agree with you, obviously, on that. Two things. One is I'm constantly aware of something that Einstein said. The older I get, more experience I have, that the past, the present, and the future exist together. And that's why it's important to make these little decisions as the best you can, and to operate with as much kindness as you can, notwithstanding that there is evil that must be dealt with, and that there is a discipline that needs to be applied where evil is
Of course.
attached to the discipline
There is.
of good faith.
Well,
Yeah.
we can all,
But
we
the
can
other
all, we
thing,
can all do little things to, we can, we can all say please and thank you more often. We can say please and thank you to the people nobody notices. Like when you
try to do that.
when you leave the building at night, you could say good night to the security guard and wish him a pleasant evening, because you can bet your bottom dollar that 99 people out of 100, they might mumble good night, but they won't be anything. Little thing, but he or she will feel, yes, I'm appreciated. My job is worthwhile. And that little and I've done this. I've seen this even in when I was last in Cameroon in Africa. Saying in French, bonjour to the doorman. The big wig African guys would walk through and ignore him, and the white man said to him, good morning. And you could see his face beamed because somebody had noticed him holding up the door and thanked him for what he'd done, his humble task. But he was made to feel that that was worthwhile. And that's what I mean about spreading a little bit of goodness, a little bit of kindness. Doesn't take much.
Common decency, you would say.
Yeah, but unfortunately, common decency is not very common anymore, like common sense. That's
and
the
they
problem.
go hand in hand, perhaps.
They do.
I'll leave you with a thought from Carl Jung, because it's time to go away. But Carl Jung there's a famous interview, you can find it on YouTube if you search for it. And this particular statement has been running around on YouTube. I'd seen the interview some time ago, because I've always been fascinated by his thoughts since I was a student. And the thing is, the interview is asking, well, how do you know that there is a divine force? And he says, and Carl Jung says, I don't know. I mean, I don't. Why do you believe that there is divine force? And Carl Jung says, I don't believe. I know. and that goes back to your point that faith is faith, which seems a sort of cliche or something, but you can't define it, because it is a matter of knowing, not believing.
Exactly.
And I suppose we're so overcome with the practicalities of getting along in life in this very practical world in which we live, with so many demands on our attention and on our pocketbooks, and our wallets, that we forget sometimes that the ultimate is there waiting for us all. So let's reflect on that and Easter week. Nicholas, thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Wow, they really were saying some fascinating things today, and I appreciate it. Sharing
Always
your time with me again.
I enjoyed it as well.
Lawyer, newsman, essayist, father to fine young men, and friend of mine. Thanks, Nicholas. Talk to you soon. I'm Will Richardson here. That's Nicholas Richardson there in Warsaw, in Poland. See you next time.
See you. Bye. Thanks.